Hi guys, I'm not dead, funnily enough. I've actually been away. I've recently had my first ever surgery in my life, and I'm sure some of you, or none of you, might be interested as to what's gone on. Now, lo and behold, it's not some majorly intensive surgery. I haven't had my stomach opened up and my gizzards taken out. No, I've had two procedures, and I kind of want to use this as an opportunity to explain why I've not been making videos and why I'm going to be taking a small break, whilst also kind of explaining the process I've gone through, because I've never had surgery, and I found this whole process to be absolutely fascinating. So basically, for the last 8 years, I've been suffering with a condition in my scalp, which has caused me to slowly and progressively lose hair over time, and it's also caused irritation, inflammation, and just general annoyances. Now, that was cured quite recently, and the operation I went through recently was to be additive to that, to then help me restore all my lost hair. So the actual procedure I've had was hair transplant surgery, which is why I'm actually wearing this really funky looking hat. So as you can see, this redness at the front is where I have had the transplant, and this is not just one of those kind of like really gimmicky procedures you see from yesteryear where somebody sticks a nail gun to your head and whatever. This procedure was actually really fascinating, because I had this connotation of thinking that these procedures were like that whole, what they used to be years and years ago, where it was like staple guns and doll hair and everything. But no, I did a bit of research after having seen some other people done, and I said, you know what? I want to get this done, because I was going to get the procedure to my scalp anyway to cure the issue of the irritation and everything. And in the same hand, I also had the opportunity to not only regrow the hair that I've lost, but to do some cosmetic procedure to improve what was already there. Because my hairline has never been this far forward, ever. Even before I started losing my hair 8 odd years ago, my hair was never this like far forwards. Now, I'm not a vain person. I didn't need to get this surgery done. I did it more so because I feel like my hair was always part of my confidence. Like, you look at photos from me from years and years ago, and I had like a majestic set of hair. I could comb it, I could friggin' do all kinds of hairdos with it, and I found that as I started losing my hair, I tended to I found like I lost a lot of my confidence with it. And it was funny because originally I wore Top Hat Harry, our lovely mascot here, as a novelty. I wore him because it was the iconic notion of our stream. And after a while, I started wearing Harry not because of the novelty, but because I was ashamed of my hairline, and because I had no confidence in how I could present my hair anymore. So I almost wore him to hide my hair as opposed to just wearing it for the novelty. So I thought, you know what? I want to do something for me. I want to see if I can get back what I'd lost. And that's what this procedure was. This was a very interesting procedure where I basically got in contact with a company called Zeering, and they had, I think how odd is, I'll explain the process for this. So this all started probably about a month and a half ago. I actually got through this process really quickly. Normally it takes a lot longer to actually get from start to finish with this, but I was lucky enough to get an early placement with this. So about at the beginning of November, just a little bit before my birthday, I had a consultation with one of Zeering's representatives, and they basically assessed me over. They talked to me about what I wanted to do, what I was expecting, and they showed me the different types of procedures. So then on the day I turn up, and I'm greeted by, obviously because of COVID and everything, you have to do like a COVID test before you go in. But when I get there, it's this really lovely looking, not necessarily a house, but it's like a manor out near Birmingham. And there are several of these places all over the country, and this just happened to be the closest one to me. And the doctor meets you, and with a bunch of the other medical professionals as well, and they take you in and they kind of just have a little talk with you about what the procedure is going to happen. They kind of map out on your scalp where everything's going to lie, and they help you understand where you want your hairline to be. And the actual process for getting this started was relatively simple. You turn up, they talk to you, they do the initial session of how you want your hair to look. And the thing is, you can a lot of this kind of goes down to how you want your hair to look, because you can only have as much hair as you have on your head. And what they put on the front is salvaged from, I say salvaged, it's transplanted from other parts of your scalp. So I thought that the sooner I get this done, the better, because the sooner you grab this, the better it's going to be overall. Then the actual procedure started, and the procedure itself was so bizarre. I mean, I've never had an operation in my life, ever. And the only bit of pain I had throughout this entire process was at the very start when they were doing it anesthetic. I had roughly 15 needles or so jabbed into my skull. There was several on the back to numb the area where they were going to get the donor hair from. And there'll be some photos coming up in a bit to show you exactly how my scalp looked after all this. And there was two types of procedures they could do. The one that I decided to go to, which was slightly more expensive, was the needlepoint procedure. I can't remember the exact name of it, but this procedure was where they take each individual hair out of the back of your head using a machine, and then they harvest those hairs and they sample each individual hair. So I go in and they inject my head, and I'm fine with needles at the best of times, so it wasn't too bad as I felt as I had my head anesthetized, and I've never had anesthetic in my life, so it was weird to feel within about 5 seconds of those needles going into my scalp that I could feel nothing on my head. So then they start. The main doctor sits behind me. I'm laying on my side, and the machine starts drilling into the epidermis of my scalp. And what they end up doing is they basically drill out the entire hair follicle, and of course they shave all my hair off this, which is why I look like a human thumb at the moment. And they ended up taking 1,700 hair follicles, and that's actually not that much in the grand scheme of things. Like my scalp isn't like the worst you'll ever see in this. So they took 1,700, and the doctor's like, you know what? Let's take another 50. So I'm like, oh boy, here we go again. So in the end of it, they ended up taking 1,750 hairs from my back, and the back of my head looks like I had an argument with a porcupine. And they then take these away, and there was a row of nurses using microscopes to inspect each individual one of my hairs just to make sure that they're healthy and that we'd be good for transplant. And as it turns out, they were. They then treat them with a special chemical, which is basically a nutrient that helps them grow better and allows them to transplant easier. And I even got to look at them, and I didn't realize this, but your hair follicles come in 3 sets. You get 1s, 2s, and 3s, and it just basically refines to how many hairs are actually in each follicle. Because if you've ever looked at your arm or anywhere that hair comes out, you may have noticed that sometimes you get multiple hairs coming out of one little pit or follicle. And I didn't realize it, but they do come in different sets, and they kind of separate them out into different sections. And then they designate them to different parts of your scalp. So the sets of 3 will go further back to thicken up the hairline, and then they sort of pan them out across the designated area. And I think this is the thing as well, like when it comes to hair restoration surgery, they do say very apparently that you have to have realistic expectations. Most of the time, you're never going to see a massive improvement, or at least you're not going to see like anything massively more than what you would have naturally had, because the aim of hair transplant surgery is to make it look natural. It's not to give you some cloud anime-esque hairline that comes down below your forehead, because I think the rule of thumb was they have to go a centimeter above where the muscle of your forehead lies, because otherwise if you start putting hairs into the muscle, you can cause muscle damage and everything else, and it's just not natural at that point. So the rule of thumb is wherever the muscle of your forehead lies, it's a centimeter above that. And they have to then try and make it look as natural as possible. So for me, I went for quite a, not necessarily, it went for my old hairline, but with a little bit more of an emphasis on the side, because I've always had a large forehead, I've always had a large skull, and hey-ho, that means I just generally don't look like I have a great hairline at the best of times. So doing what we did with this helped reinforce the hairline I already had, giving back what I used to have, and then a little bit more, which was super cool. And I actually didn't feel a thing from the salvaging of the hair, because once they'd salvaged all the hair, that took about 3 hours, 2 hours for them to do that, from this anesthetic going into my scalp to salvaging to sampling all 1,750 hair follicles. And then we had a break. We had lunch. The main doctor went away and did some other stuff. The nurses were inspecting all my hair. I wish I'd really taken some photos of this, so I might just get some stock footage of another procedure that went on like this, just so you know kind of what happens. And then the doctor comes back in, and the final step of the process begins. And this is where you feel like you're getting bullied by some little mosquito or something, because the doctor then has to make incisions in the front of your scalp where the hairline is going to be so that they can insert the follicles. So that's another 1,750 little jabs in your forehead so that the follicles can then go in. And this was with a kind of like a little puncher incisor, which allows the flesh to be pushed in so that you can insert the follicles. And once the doctor had done all those, the main doctor actually then had didn't actually stick around after that. He did the main sampling on the back, and then the incisions on the front, and then he let his nurses and attendants take over, because at this point all that was needed was for the sampled hair follicles to then be inserted. And I had at this stage I had 2 nurses and attendants at any given time, and they were basically taking shifts of 20 minutes each, where they would be taking hair follicles and inserting them into these holes using these tiny little tweezers. And throughout all of this, I was watching Netflix. I was watching The Boys. I was watching a movie or two. I was just chowing down on some coffee, and I tell you what, the hardest part of all of this was the preparation, because before the surgery, you're not allowed to drink coffee. You're not allowed to work out for at least 5 or 6 days beforehand. So it's that preparation and the lead up to the procedure that was actually harder than the procedure itself. Unless, of course, you're obsessed, turned off by pain. But hey, that's beside the point. So the process of actually putting the follicles in my scalp was the part that took the longest. So everything that led up to doing the incisions on my forehead had been about 3.5, 4 hours or so. And I'd gotten there at 7:30 in the morning, thereabouts. And by the time that they had started putting the follicles in my scalp, and they'd done everything beforehand from assessing my scalp and drawing on the lines and salvaging the hair, that had led up till about 1 p.m. midday thereabouts. And then for literally about 3 or 4 hours, it was just 2 nurses and attendants sat next to me, putting these follicles in my head whilst I watched TV. And then every 20 minutes, one of them would swap out with another nurse who was fresh-handed, and then they would just keep going through that process. And by about 4:30, I mean, I fell asleep twice through this entire process. One, when the guy was digging out the hairs from the back of my scalp. And the other time I fell asleep was when they were putting them in my forehead. Like, I literally felt so little. And they were really courteous as well. I mean, they gave me, if you feel pain or anything, they give you ibuprofen, they give you diazepam to calm you down. And they pretty much treat you like royalty for the entire time you're there. And so by about 4:30, the doctor comes in and says, yes, this is all looking very good. I can see that they've been trying to study now. And then that's when the aftercare starts. And the aftercare, in all honesty, is probably some of the most... The procedure is nothing. The before and after is where it kicks your absolute ass. So once the surgery is done, and once I'd been driven home and I was able to rest, that's when the aftercare started. And they give you everything you could possibly need to know for the next few days. Because the first 2 weeks of recovery afterwards are the most important. Now, I'm taking time off Twitch. I'm taking time off YouTube. I don't particularly want to, but to make sure this stays, I kind of have to, because if you do anything that overexerts yourself, or you go against the given measures to make sure your hair recovers properly, you can literally have all these follicles that have been so tentatively planted in your skull fall out. And the last thing I want to do is lose the hair from the back to then also lose those hairs from the front and then have a complete reduction of hair across my entire skull. Like, if you ever go through any of this, you have to take it easy afterwards. I've seen horror stories of people who've had these transplants, and then they go back to work 2 days later and they put hats on and they're working out, and then they start feeling these follicles fall out of their head. So literally for the last 3 days, I've been sat around the house like a potato. But thankfully, they do give you an entire healthcare package full of stuff and information to look after yourself. They give you these medical pads that you put on your bed so that you can lay down without making... Because obviously you've got open wounds on the back of your head, so you don't want to be making a bloody mess of your pillows. They have these pads that you can put down that help soak up the blood, that helps comfort you whilst you're laying down, and they have an entire checklist of things you do day by day to make sure that you're giving your hair the best chance of staying in. And it's literally a diary that tells you what to do each day. So there's graft care, donor care, hair wash, medication, sleep, and swelling. And on each day, it tells you what to do for each of these categories. So, for example, on day 1, for my graft care, it says, do not touch grafts, spray solution. Oh boy, the solution. So basically, for 10 days, solidly, every 30 minutes, I have to have a bottle of saline solution, and I have to do this. Every 30 minutes. Now, you even need to do that whilst you sleep. But what I have found is that you don't need to do it every 30 minutes. Because otherwise you're going to ruin yourself. Like, imagine, you're going to ruin your sleep. You're going to be ruining your sleep either way. I've had the worst night's sleep I've ever had the last 4 days. But for the hairline, I think it's worth it. So what I've done is I've basically set an alarm on my alarm clock every 4 hours, every 2 to 3 hours, so I can wake up, spritz it, go back to sleep. For the first night, I did kind of just stay awake. I didn't really go to sleep at all. I just stayed up spraying it, making sure that, and I just watched a movie. As far as I'm aware, these hairs are already growing, but they're not going to be back to their natural state for about 10 months. So I will see some growth as the rest of my hair starts growing as well. But these ones at the front the actual transplants themselves aren't going to grow firmly and be back to their normal stage for another 10 months, which is actually good because it means that the other parts of this procedure have a chance to take effect as well. Because on top of the transplant, you also have the option to take finasteride and other medications that help natural hair growth. And what this is a drug that blocks the testosterone from getting to your scalp. And although I don't know the purest ins and outs of it, the point of taking finasteride is to strengthen the hair you already have, to prevent the microization of the hairline recession you have. So by taking this, it secures the hair I have, it strengthens the hair I have, and it even regrows some of the hairs that I've lost. So you'll notice that there's almost like a little lighter patch there. They purposefully leave that there so that as you take the finasteride, the hair that has been lost regrows into that little gap, and it helps connect the transplanted area with your natural hairline. So there are a lot of things you can do additionally to the transplant surgery to help encourage natural hair growth, and it's absolutely worth it. So when it comes to deciding what it is you want to do with this, if you're going to do it, you might as well go whole hog. Like, seriously. This has been an incredible experience. And through the pictures you see online, I'm going to be definitely keeping a track of all of this and keeping you guys updated with how things are going. But I'm so glad I did it. Like, I'm kind of glad that I've treated this as a little bit of a holiday as well, because I've been working my socks off for a while, and I want to give this as good a chance to succeed as possible. And you know what? I do hope that it leads me to rediscover the confidence I used to have with my hairline. And to be fair, it already kind of has. I already see this hairline growing in securely and everything, and it's already made me feel happier in and of itself. And I don't put weight on vanity, honestly, but it is nice to have a good hairline again. I just wanted that hairline. Did I need it? No, I didn't need it. I was happy either way, but it is nice to have that option. So the plan for now is I'm going to keep following the guidance that I've been given. I'm going to let this hair settle in. I'm going to keep doing what I need to do, and I will very likely be starting at my work again as of about the 20th, but I probably won't be using a webcam for that little bit, just for the sheer sake that I can't wear Harry. I can't wear hats. I can't do anything that would exacerbate or increase my heart rate too high. Otherwise, possibility of losing these follicles goes up. So I'm going to take a few days. I'm going to let the back of my head recover. Ow. That was a really bad idea. And I'm going to let the front settle in. So I do hope this has been informative. This whole procedure has been absolutely fascinating. And although I can't say it's needed, if you've ever been interested in trying to get your hair done, I'd say look into it. Of course, it is something I would recommend looking into on a case-by-case basis, because different places do different things, and you must do your research. Do your research, because there are some shady companies out there that aren't exactly the most legitimate towards this kind of stuff. So anyway, thank you for listening to this video, guys. I do hope this has been interesting, because it has been for me, and I hope you will be around when I come back to streaming in a few days, and hopefully you look forward to the VTubing I end up falling into because of all this. And let's see how this all pans out, shall we? So, thank you for watching. I'll see you all guys in the next video or whenever else I come back. Ta-ra!